that for the time, basically, the movement in Macomb retreated. It had simply become too violent. The movement moved into other areas, into Hattiesburg and up into the Delta. It persisted here, but Macomb would no longer be the same. But that moment also is essential in another way. This, by the way, I just want to show this very quickly. This is Vernon Damer, who was the civil rights activist in Hattiesburg. I know some of you are from there. Vernon Damer also was murdered. Sam Bowers was convicted for orchestrating his murder. This is the other picture I wanted to show you in Hattiesburg. This is the local registrar of voters, a man named Theron Lynn. There's a kind of interesting, quite long story about why Theron Lynn, one of the SNCC people brought a hidden camera in to film Theron Lynn, what he was doing to blacks trying to register to vote, and it became a CBS documentary. These are people moving up in the Delta. This is Anzie Moore, Bob Moses, and others. This shows the kind of voter registration work that people were doing up in the Delta. I want to talk briefly about this woman and another woman. One of the things that, I used the phrase earlier, the stone that the builders have rejected, I have made the cornerstone. Part of what was remarkable about SNCC is the recognition that you might find leadership in places that you weren't expecting to find it. This is a woman named Fannie Lou Hamer. She's a timekeeper on a plantation in Sunflower County. Had a minimal education, wasn't even aware that blacks had a right to register to vote until SNCC workers came and knocked on her door and told her. Went down and tried to register, was immediately thrown off her plantation. Would go on to become one of the most celebrated SNCC leaders. And this is, in fact, her speaking at the 1964 Democratic National Convention. Fannie Lou Hamer would say to people till she died, I can do this, you can do it. This is another person you've probably never heard of. This is a woman named Unita Blackwell. Unita Blackwell from Myersville, Mississippi, in East Queen County, had an 8th grade education, which in her community made her, in fact, relatively well educated. When the SNCC field workers came, she became a SNCC organizer. She also went to the Atlantic City Convention in 1964. She completed a GED. She went to college. She completed a master's degree in planning. She became mayor of her town, Myersville, Mississippi. She became, was a recipient of a MacArthur Genius Award for 5 years. She also was one of the people who was involved with Jimmy Carter in the negotiations to normalize relations with the People's Republic of China in the 1970s. This is a woman who 15 years before had an 8th grade education and was living in that shack. The stone that the builders rejected, I have made the cornerstone. This is kind of an interesting story, very brief. This is a moment in 1963. This is the one speech that John F. Kennedy gave that unequivocally committed the Kennedy administration to civil rights and announced his intention to introduce a civil rights bill. This was in the summer of 1963. He gave the speech amidst the crisis at the University of Alabama. That same night, Medgar Evers was shot in his driveway in Jackson. And also, at that same day, Fannie Lou Hamer was brutally beaten in the Winona jail. In response to this violence, organizers with SNCC, working together with organizers in CORE, because at this time they were collaborating in an organization called COFO, Congress of Federated Organizations, basically realized that civil rights workers were being assaulted and murdered with complete impunity. And that if the nation was going to actually care about what was happening in Mississippi, maybe you needed to bring the nation's children. So they arranged in 1964, in that summer, to invite students, mostly white, mostly northern, from colleges around the country, some 800 students, to come south in the summer of 1964 into Mississippi to participate in what they called the Mississippi Summer Project, or Freedom Summer. This would become the high water mark of the Mississippi movement. Here you see the students at a training that took place the week before they came down in June at Oxford, Ohio, what is now Miami of Ohio University. And there you see these young students with guitars. It was the 1960s, singing with Fannie Lou Hamer. Here you see these students arm in arm singing "We Shall Overcome" as they prepared to board buses going south. The very first students to arrive were murdered. This is the station wagon in which James Chaney, a black Corps worker from Meridian, Mississippi, Mickey Schwerner, a white New Yorker who had been working in Meridian for about 6 months with Corps, and Andrew Goodman, another white New Yorker, a Freedom Summer volunteer who had been in the state of Mississippi for 1 day. This was the car outside Philadelphia, Mississippi, in which they were apprehended. They disappeared. The next day, this car was found half burned in the Baltito swamp. Well, if one of the assumptions of the organizers of the summer project was that maybe the nation would pay attention if the people getting murdered were white, if that was one of their assumptions, it proved perfectly true. This became one of the largest manhunts for 44 days in history. While Mississippi officials dismissed the whole thing as a hoax, a publicity stunt, hundreds of FBI agents were dispatched to Mississippi by Lyndon Johnson. They dragged every river in the state. They found some bodies, too. They found a couple of bodies, a guy named Charles Moore and Hezekiah D., 2 Corps workers who had been murdered and thrown into the Mississippi River. It was interesting. When those bodies were recovered, there was a massive media flurry. And as soon as it became apparent it wasn't these 3, everybody packed up their truck and went home. And the fact that I have trouble recalling their names says something, doesn't it? Eventually, after 44 days, those bodies were discovered in an earthen dam outside Philadelphia, Mississippi. This would become the most notorious crime of the civil rights era. A crime that, in some sense, its notoriety carries with it a reminder, as Ella Baker said, that the death of a white mother's son mattered more to the nation still than the death of a black mother's son. The summer project would continue. Some 800 students would come south. They would come into this town and towns all over the state, organizing freedom schools, doing voter registration work, building an organization called the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party, which would proceed to the Democratic Convention in Atlantic City in 1964 and challenge the regular Democrats as the legitimate Democratic Party of Mississippi. I want to end on that note because the head of the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party was a man named Lawrence Guillot, who passed last week. And Lawrence Guillot was also one of the people who made it possible for us to have this grant. So I think in the spirit of saying the names of people whose contributions have been marginalized in our history textbooks. That's a useful one to understand. Thanks very much.
Why don't we take a quick 5-minute break? Okay, try to hold for 5 minutes. Restroom, all that stuff, go to the drink or something. We'll come back and keep the
Are you going to answer questions?
Apparently, I don't have to write
Oh, good.
Sit there, we all got a name. Everybody good? She's doing really good. Yeah, the quicker you get there, the better for me.
Thank you so much for coming.
You were rattling off names. Good memory.
Okay, I think you're kind of moderator. I'd be pleased.
What's your expertise?
None.
None?
Our other.
You'll know where I'll be.
I think you know what.
we have students in the front, a long first Roman Marion.
I'm not gonna say it's her.
So, they would be protesting whatever their exams came.
Drink too much and get bad.
No, that's true.
I had to come, you know, the main reason I did those coming from your I'm serious. I'm serious. Because I was like, that didn't have any. Dr. Brock, good to meet you. I'm Janice View. Working with the grant. Yes. I don't think we met before. Yeah. Look forward to hearing you. What do you talk about? Sounds good. Right, because what happened last, oh, I know, because we can make it when we were in Atlanta. And my mother-in-law, that's right. And then,
You can think that our generation away from things now, I think I'm like 2, maybe 3. I'm 87 years old.
Yes, I know.
Particularly when it comes to young people.
That's great.
You may want to ask flex their ages to get close to.
Don't even want to know that's my age.
As
Right,
I
like
meant
it
to say,
sounds.
how many years have been teaching, so you
Yeah.
can kind of get a feel for it.
Yeah.
I know you wrote down this stuff in the book.
I did. Oh my gosh, she's so.
Yeah.
I would like, that's what I read, God is.
I'm just saying.
That's what you know. Kind of take that key.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah.
So yours is pretty shape.
Well, we're doing this in 5 years.
What did you do?
You had to file. I did take it works on your sense of smell. You can't taste unless you smell it. You hold it over, it's close your eyes, you eat an apple or onion, you don't do it. Anyway, the sense of smell tells your brain when you're full. And normally it takes about 20 minutes to start eating. So the sensor makes it happen in 2 or 3 minutes. But you have to go back there to leave off. The first I have a combination drinking and then also you almost, you have to eliminate your condiments and vegetables.
I'm just talking to see if my
Cabbage, string beans, green, beetle, corn,
Yes, yes, exactly.
I had a whole set of Dandy and also thanks to Lenny and some more. But in perspective, I dropped it $8.
Exactly. I was living. No, I bought it. I didn't find the price. I was like, I got up to, and then I bought her some like really Gucci looking socks too, just like a gift. And then I went out there.
Outside.
Like we're talking about a kid. Beer. And of course, I didn't return it. Chair.
No, I bought her two like last month. And I said, you drink and be good. And she was like, and so like she had them and everybody's like, what'd you get? And she's like, look. And so pulled them out and I was like, she was so fun. It was like, I know you guys.
Well, I go first. Yeah.
But the main thing is, you know, the thing is, clean your plate. And you get full. And of course, I go to roller on Wednesday, I go to
We're doing like 5 on 10, 5 on 3.